In the last few studies, we've been looking at the issue in Genesis 1:26 of God creating man in his likeness. And I at least suggested that I think that likeness refers to our ability to think outside the realm of our experience. We can actually think about things that we have never experienced. We can imagine flying in space and all kinds of things like this. I'm suggesting, I think that's what the likeness is referring to. So that, as James says, when we insult or speak against another person, we're not speaking particularly against their physical appearance. We're speaking against their character. We're speaking against the choices and decisions and the thinking that goes on within that person, that part of us that is like God. But I want to back up and deal now with this word image. Now, to be honest, and I say this at the outset, some, not all, but a lot of modern scholars, biblical scholars, they think that these two words are just talking about the same thing. But there's a number of passages in which they take two words and they say, well, they're just synonyms. And I would say, in a general sense, yeah, these are synonyms. But I still think that God has a purpose and a significance in stating two things here. I don't think it's just to pile up the idea that in some way man is like God. I really think that there's something, and I hope to demonstrate this, not all today, we're going to introduce this today, that there is some distinction here. And I think we benefit from understanding that distinction rather than assimilating these and saying we're just talking about really the same thing. I'm Pastor Tim Holscher, and we are looking at the Word of God, trying to answer the question, what is man? What are we? Well, Genesis 1:26 would indicate that we're the result of God creating. Now, God created Adam and Eve. That's going to be borne out in the text today. And he makes man's physical nature out of the dust of the ground, but I believe the creation also refers to the immaterial life that he breathes into man, that soul and spirit that animate this physical nature. And so God creates in this regard our nature. He doesn't take existing substance to make the immaterial spirit and the immaterial soul, and then all the other things that really give animation, character to this physical existence. And so an understanding that that's creation, and I believe biblically that creation is limited then to Adam and Eve. They're the ones that God created. He didn't create me in time. And there's a number of reasons, and if I recall or remember to think about this, we will come back to that issue. In a nutshell, for a nutshell answer on why I don't think that is, number one, the Bible attributes creation here, not to the rest of us. And secondly, because we come into the world fallen, David says we're fallen, Job says he's fallen, Paul says we're fallen. If we look at the scriptures and it talks about our fallen nature, and that's even going to have bearing on this idea of the image of God, this fallen nature, then we'd have to be saying then that God is creating fallen beings. And he's not creating fallen beings. Scripture does say he knits us together, but he's knitting us together of existing stuff. And that's different than saying creating. He's taking things from your mother and father and putting them together. And he's not cleaning it up and making it, improving on it. He's not creating brand new stuff within our mothers. He's actually, we know the biology of this. He takes from the father and the mother, puts these together, and we get characteristics. So that my voice sounds a little bit like my father. I look this way a little bit like my father. And my sisters bear resemblance to my mother. All of these things are natural because we're passing on genetic material. And so we are procreated. And if you don't understand what procreation is, that's essentially, we're talking about men and women coming together and really through what popularly we call today sex, produce children. And we pass on genetic material. That's procreation. We're taking what God initially created in the past, and it's come down to us in the gene pool of mankind. And so all of us, in one sense, are related going back to Adam and Eve in that sense. And we're all part of the what popularly we call the human race. So this is some background on this idea of what we're talking about, that we are generated, procreated, rather than created. And I know that offends people because people like to think we're the creation of God. Well, Adam was, but I came from a mom and dad, and Adam did not come from parents, and Eve didn't come from parents. Now, Genesis 1:26, it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness." Just as an aside, and I think I pointed this out the other day, in John 1:1, we have, in the beginning was the Word. And I believe one of the reasons he's called the Word is because he's the person that is speaking out God's plan. So I think that when you have somebody actually speaking here and saying, I believe this is God the Son that actually is saying this, but it's something that I also believe that this is more than just us, is more than just a plural of majesty, where a king sitting on the throne would say, we have decided, and he's not talking about anybody else but himself. I believe that this does also refer to the totality of the Trinity, those three persons, the Father, Son, and Spirit, but the Son's the one that's saying this. So he says, let us make man in our image and according to our likeness. And there are two things that he says here. And in the Hebrew over here, we have these two letters. They look a little bit the same, except down here on the bottom of this letter, if you look, and let me blow it up so you can really see it better. If you can see these two letters at the beginning of these words, you can see this one is curved all the way around, and this one comes down, and there's this little angle that comes out, and this is a beth. Makes a kind of a b sound. This is a calf, and makes a k sound. This actually even takes a different form when you throw it at the end of a word. But I'm just trying to help you see that we're talking about two different letters, and each one of them is functioning as a sort of as a preposition. This one is a preposition. In the image, our image, and this one, kata, or calf, I'm comparing it to the Greek kata, which would say a similar thing, but according to, by the standard of our likeness. So this is damuth, is the word we've been talking about. Zelem is the word we're going to be looking at now. Now let me make this a little bit smaller here. There are some that suggest on this idea of being in the image and likeness, however they handle this, that it has to do with the fact that we have rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, or the birds of the sky, or the heavens, and over this cattle, and over the earth, and over all the creeping things that creep on the earth. And there may be some validity to that, but I think that there's definitely more going on in this. And I think part of the reason that there is some possible validity as to this is I think this goes back to the likeness, that because God imbues us with the ability to actually think outside our realm of experience, we can actually think on how to actually have rule and mastery over these things, where a lot of animals are not trying to figure out how to master their environment, how to reign or rule over other creatures. Yeah, are there some? Yeah. A dog might be trying to think how to take charge over other animals in the farmyard, dogs that especially are used for dealing with livestock and such. But they're not really, but they're doing it kind of by way of a breed, because not all dogs will do that. So all of this simply to say that there is perhaps some validity in that goes back to this ability to think in a way that animals do not think in that same way. I'm not saying animals don't have some sort of a thinking process, but it doesn't resemble the thinking process by any stretch that we do, that we have. And so with all of that, God having created them, I want to deal also with verse 27. It says, and God created man. And this, and just for interest here, because I think this is important, it says he created the man, the Adam, little ha Adam. And I believe he is referencing Adam, because that's the name that we have here, Adam. In the image, that is in his image, and in the image of God, he created, and then this is the marking of the object of the sentence, and then we have the pronoun his. It says created him, not his, but him in this case. Got to think straight. And then it says, and then he switches. He goes from ha-adam, and he uses a singular pronoun here. And I do believe that singular pronoun is being used collectively of these two. It could have said them, but we're going to have a them here in just a second here. But I think because he's looking at this, then putting them both together in this, male and female. And these are gender words. I mean, these words are communicating gender. And I don't want to offend you, but the significance of these gender words are very anatomically pointed. Just because this word, zakar, for man, is that which pierces. And the word for female is a word that referred to a hammer or a hole, a hammer that was used to drive a peg in a hole. And this is then also is used of hole. You know, I'm not trying to be graphic, but I'm just trying to help you see. Those are very anatomically related terms. And then he says that's the way he created them. He created them as man, male, and female. And it says, he says male and female he created, and now we have the plural clearly. Again, the mark of the object created them. And you can see the difference between the pronoun there. Even if you don't read Hebrew, you can see that's a different letter than this letter. This is the pronoun here. The point is, he creates both Adam and Eve, even though he is going to derive some of Eve's substance. He takes Adam's initial substance out of the ground and forms him. And Eve, he does not go out and take it out of the ground, but he creates it from Adam's side. And Adam was not. Just try to help us understand this, because I heard of one Bible teacher suggest that Adam must have been like about a 300 and some pound man for God to be able to go in and take out of his side and create her. And that the idea of that man is in is that God must have taken enough clay to form Adam's nature. Now he's going to take a piece out of Adam and he's going to create Eve. And when he does that, well, there has to be enough to create a whole person. But I think that God could take that substance, and I'm making a conjecture here because he doesn't tell us exactly how he did it. He just says that he takes from his side. He takes a plank in the Hebrew. He takes like a plank from Adam's side and forms Eve from her. And it's more than just that he takes some of Adam. The whole point of that in Genesis chapter 2 was God had brought all the animals before him, and Adam could see that none of them were compatible. None of them were a complement to him. But Eve was, because he says, she's now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. In other words, she literally comes from me, so she is from man, which he couldn't say of any of those other creatures. You may love your dog, your cat, your horses, whatever other animals you really like, but I can guarantee none of them, according to God's estimation, none of them are actually a complement to you as a human being. God made human beings to be complements to each other, men and women in this regard. So this is the creation of Adam and the creation of Eve, just in a nutshell in these two verses when he's talking about this. And in this, he tells us two times here in verse 27. He told in verse 26, but here two times it emphasizes he created in his image. But now we have already seen when we were looking at likeness that God is a spirit. God is a spirit being. In fact, I want to go to Colossians chapter 1 where it talks about God the Son, Jesus Christ, and it says he, referring to Jesus Christ, is the image. Now it's a different word because we're in the New Testament here. It's the word icon. He is the image of notice this, invisible God. And I believe this is a specific person of the Godhead. I believe this is God the Father, and it refers to him as invisible, indicating that the Father has not shown up in a visible physical form. That is not the way he's shown up. When God showed up in the Old Testament in physical forms, as we've already said, that is, I believe John 1 would indicate this. Jesus in John 8 indicated this, speaking to those group of people when he says that Abraham saw his day. Why? Because God the Son came down and talked with Abraham, especially at the Oaks of Mamre, up on the hill overlooking Sodom and Gomorrah. And he talked with him as accompanied with two angels. And so there's God the Father is invisible. But the Son came down here, and he is then the image of the invisible God. In other words, in a physical form, he's the image of God. And clearly, God being invisible, then how can the Son be his image if by image is meant that he looks like God in terms of a physical makeup? Again, trying to dispel this notion, this idea. Image is going to refer to another aspect of our being. It's not going to refer to how physically we look like this. I mean, just look at how many people look. I mean, the diversity of physical appearances between human beings is incredible how different we all are. So which one actually looks like God? Well, we'd say, well, it's just generally of our physical makeup, and it's not even that. It's not even that. So when we're talking here about God creating Adam and Eve in his image, we're talking about something other than a physical makeup, because God is spirit, John 4, and God is invisible. Doesn't have a physical appearance. God the Father in this case, because there's a specific person of the Godhead, even though they don't put a "the" over here in English, there is one here, and that's one of the ways that you're distinguishing persons of the Godhead in the New Testament. So hopefully this is helpful. We're going to come back. There's a lot more to talk about here with regard to the image of God, but get you thinking about this nature, about the fact that in some way God created Adam and Eve in his image. Still remains to see exactly what that image is, how God works that out, but he does, and we're going to look at a number of passages, and I hope we'll be able to make a good case for what that means for man to be in the image of God. Having said all of this, then, I trust that you have a good day in the Lord, that you appreciate what God's done in your life. Remember that he knit you together, didn't create you, but he knit you together. So he did take a personal interest in your design and plan, whatever that is in you. And with all of that, then, I thank you for joining me.